In 2025, the average American spends 7 hours a day staring at a screen. That's more time than most of us sleep. We scroll through breakfast, swipe through lunch, and doom scroll ourselves to sleep. The internet isn't just part of our lives anymore. It is our life. So imagine this, a place where your phone becomes a very expensive paperweight, where going viral means you caught the flu, where the cloud is just, an actual cloud. Sounds impossible, right? Wrong. Scattered across the United States, hidden in mountain valleys, tucked behind desert ridges, buried in Appalachian hollers, there are towns that have said no to the internet, not because they can't afford it, not because the infrastructure doesn't exist, but because they chose this, deliberately, legally, sometimes enthusiastically. Some did it to protect billion-dollar scientific equipment. Others did it because they believe Wi-Fi signals are literally making people sick. A few did it for reasons that sound almost dystopian, like keeping their young people trapped. And here's the thing, you can't just visit most of these places. Some require federal clearance. Some require marriage into the community. One requires you to prove you've never owned a smartphone. Yeah, that's not a typo. Today, we're mapping these digital dead zones, the towns where America decided to log off forever. Some of their stories are inspiring, some are deeply unsettling, and a few, well, let's just say they'll make you wonder whether the people living there are escaping something or hiding something. Trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to want to know what else we've uncovered. And if you've ever fantasized about throwing your phone into a lake and starting over, this video is basically real estate shopping. Let's begin with the most famous one, a town you've probably never heard of, doing something you've definitely never thought about. Green Bank, West Virginia, the quietest town in America. Picture this, you're driving through the Allegheny Mountains on a winding 2-lane road. Your phone buzzes with a notification, some email, probably spam, and then nothing. The signal bars vanish one by one. First 3, then 2, then 1, then 0. You assume it's just a dead spot? Happens all the time in rural areas, right? But then you pass a sign, it's official, it's federal, and it says, National Radio Quiet Zone, turn off all electronic devices. Welcome to Green Bank, West Virginia. Green Bank sits at the heart of a 13,000 square mile area officially designated the National Radio Quiet Zone, established in 1958, making it older than NASA, older than the internet itself, and definitely older than the concept of leaving someone on red. The reason? About a mile outside of town sits the Green Bank Telescope, the world's largest fully steerable radio telescope. This thing is massive, a dish the size of 2 football fields that can detect electromagnetic signals from billions of light years away. It's listening for pulsars, quasars, and potentially extraterrestrial intelligence. And here's the problem. Your phone emits roughly the same amount of radio interference as a particularly loud cosmic event. Your microwave oven, running for 10 seconds, can drown out signals that traveled 13 billion years to reach us, so they banned it, all of it. By the numbers, population, 143 permanent residents, established, 1958 Wi-Fi routers in town, 0 cell towers, 0 Bluetooth devices allowed, 0 area of the quiet zone, 13,000 square miles. Fine for operating a banned device, up to $50,000. The rules are enforced by a single man, a guy with a radio frequency detector who drives around in a truck looking for illegal signals. Locals call him the Wi-Fi police. When he finds a violation, usually a tourist who didn't read the signs, he knocks on doors and politely asks people to turn things off. The weird part is that the locals, the people who were born here, who've never known anything else, they think the newcomers are a little odd. Not because they believe in invisible signals making them sick, but because they chose to come here. Why would anyone choose to live without internet? One local told a reporter in 2019. Most of us are just trying to figure out how to get it. That's the irony of Green Bank. The residents who were born into silence dream of connection. The ones who fled modern life to find silence wonder how anyone could want to leave. And maybe that's the question Green Bank asks all of us. In a world where you can be anywhere, digitally at any moment, is there still value in being only where you are? Speaking of hiding from technology, our next town took things a step further. They didn't just turn off the internet, they made sure it could never arrive. Boulder Creek, California, the town that signed away the signal. Boulder Creek is tucked into the Santa Cruz Mountains, about an hour south of San Francisco. Redwoods taller than apartment buildings. Creeks that sparkle like something out of a screensaver. Air so clean it almost hurts to breathe if you're coming from the city. Between 2000 and 2010, the population of surrounding areas grew by 40%. Real estate prices tripled. Weekenders started flooding in, parking their Teslas on dirt roads and complaining about the lack of 5G. And And then came the ISPs. In 2008, 3 separate internet service providers applied for permits to install high-speed fiber optic cables through Boulder Creek. Finally, reliable internet, streaming, working from home without the connection dying every time a squirrel looked at the phone lines wrong. The town said no, not the government, the town, specifically a coalition of long-term residents who called themselves the Boulder Creek Preservation Committee. They circulated a petition, they packed town hall meetings, and they convinced enough landowners to refuse right-of-way access that all 3 ISP applications were effectively dead on arrival. "We're not against the internet," one committee member said in a 2009 interview. "We're against becoming Palo Alto with trees." By the numbers: population, Dewonter O's 200, including surrounding unincorporated areas. Median home price, 2008, $385,000 median home price, projected if fiber had been installed, based on comparable areas. 1.2 millionth number of tech company satellite offices, 0 number of coffee shops with free Wi-Fi, 0 internet available at public library, yes, dial-up speed, 2-hour limit. Today, Boulder Creek remains in a kind of technological amber. The library has internet, technically, but it's the kind of connection that makes you nostalgic for AOL. You want to load a web page? Better pack a lunch. Boulder Creek never became another casualty of California's tech colonization. The redwoods are still there. The artists who moved here in the 70s are still there. The weird little bookstore that only sells used paperbacks and tarot cards is still there. And the people who want fast internet, they're still in San Francisco, doom scrolling about how much they wish they could escape. Sometimes the best way to protect a place is to make it just inconvenient enough that people won't bother. Boulder Creek didn't build walls, they just didn't build roads. But if Boulder Creek is about preserving the past, our next town is selling something else entirely, a future where you choose to disconnect, and they're making a killing doing it. Hulett, Wyoming, where dead phones come to charge. Quick geography lesson: Hulett, Wyoming sits at the base of Devil's Tower. About 400 people live here year-round, and approximately 400,000 tourists pass through every year on their way to see the tower. In 2017, the town council had an idea, a controversial, counterintuitive, possibly genius idea. They noticed something. The tourists who came to Hulett were increasingly stressed out. They'd arrive at Devil's Tower, this ancient, sacred, awe-inspiring geological wonder, and immediately start looking for the Wi-Fi password. They'd take 47 photos for Instagram, check how many likes they'd gotten, and leave without ever really seeing anything. The council proposed a radical experiment. What if Hulett became the opposite of everywhere else? In 2018, they passed an ordinance prohibiting public Wi-Fi anywhere in town limits, not private connections. If you owned a house or business, you could do whatever you wanted inside your walls. But hotels, restaurants, bars, the town square, 0 public internet access. Cell signals weren't banned. They couldn't be legally, but the council politely asked Verizon not to add any additional towers. Within 2 years, Hulett had reinvented itself as a digital detox destination. The Hulett Motel added a tagline to its sign: "We don't have Wi-Fi. Talk to each other." A new restaurant opened called the Dead Zone Diner, where the menu explicitly stated, if you're here looking for the internet, you're in the wrong place. If you're here looking for the best chicken fried steak in Wyoming, welcome. By the numbers: population, 383 public Wi-Fi hotspots, 0 hotels offering digital detox packages, 3 average price per night for detox package, $180 average increase in tourist spending, 2017 versus 2022, 340% percentage of tourists who complain, 15% percentage of tourists who return within 2 years, 47%. The town leans into it now. They sell merchandise, hoodies that say, "I survived Hulett." Here's the uncomfortable truth Hulett accidentally exposed. We're addicted, not metaphorically, literally. Our brains have been rewired to crave the dopamine hits of notifications, likes, and updates. We've lost the capacity to be bored, to be still, to be somewhere without needing to document it. Hulett didn't just turn off the internet, it sold people a temporary cure, and they're lining up to pay for it. Of course, not everyone who rejects technology is doing it for profit. Some are doing it for God. And that brings us to a community that's been offline since before online was even a word. Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, the original offline. I almost didn't include this one because, let's be honest, you probably already know that the Amish don't use the internet. But here's what you probably don't know. The Amish relationship with technology is way more complicated than they reject everything. And in the last decade, the internet has caused a genuine crisis within the community that threatens to tear apart traditions that have survived for 300 years. Let me explain. The Amish don't reject technology because they think it's evil. They reject it because they believe it damages community. Right, the telephone didn't get banned because Alexander Graham Bell was a sinner. It got banned because families stopped visiting each other in person. Cars weren't prohibited because combustion engines are demonic. They were prohibited because they let people live too far apart. Every technology gets evaluated by a simple question. Will this bring us closer together or push us apart? For centuries, the answer was usually push apart, so most things got banned. But then came the smartphone. By the numbers, estimated Amish population in Lancaster County, 40,000 percentage who own businesses, approximately 35% percentage of those businesses that require some internet access for suppliers, payments, and inventory, estimated 60-80% community phones, shared landlines at the edge of property, not inside homes. Common Amish youth who leave during Rumspringa, roughly 15% Amish youth who leave permanently due to technology specifically, rising, exact figures undisclosed. Young Amish people are increasingly asking uncomfortable questions. If the internet is acceptable for selling tables, why isn't it acceptable for learning new skills? If we can text suppliers, why can't we text friends? If we can look at photographs of our furniture online, why can't we look at photographs of the outside world? The schism is real. Entire communities have split over these questions. Some have loosened rules dramatically, allowing smartphones with filtered internet that blocks certain sites. Others have doubled down, banning even the business exceptions. The Amish are facing something that the rest of us have never had to face. A genuine, collective choice about technology. We got the internet delivered whether we wanted it or not. They got to decide, and watching them struggle with that decision, watching communities fracture over questions of screens and signals, it makes you wonder if we'd had to choose, what would we have chosen? Probably exactly what we have now, but we might have thought about it more. Not all technology rejectionists have 300-year-old religious traditions to back them up though. Some of them have something almost as powerful, pure, uncut paranoia. And that brings us to one of the strangest communities in America. Snowflake, Arizona, where the signals can't find you. About 200 miles northeast of Phoenix, near the small town of Snowflake, Arizona, there's an unmarked community that residents call the Sensitivity Colony, or sometimes just the Land. It has no official name. It doesn't appear on most maps. And it was founded in the early 1990s by people who believe, genuinely, fervently believe, that the electromagnetic radiation produced by modern technology is making them sick. These aren't Amish. They're not religious isolationists. Many of them used to be software engineers, doctors, teachers, lawyers, normal people with normal jobs who at some point started experiencing symptoms they couldn't explain. Chronic fatigue, brain fog, skin burning, headaches, insomnia, heart palpitations. Western medicine offered no answers. Test after test came back normal. Doctors suggested stress. Psychiatrists suggested anxiety. Some suggested they were making it up, but the symptoms were real. They were debilitating. And the only thing that seemed to help was getting away from everything. One by one, through word of mouth, through early internet forums, before they could no longer tolerate being online, they found each other. They pooled money. They bought desert land as far from civilization as they could afford. And they built a community where no electromagnetic signals could reach. By the numbers, estimated permanent residents, 30 to 50 cell towers within 20 miles, 0 power lines within community, 0, all solar with DC systems, which emit less EMF than AC. Residents who formerly worked in tech industries, approximately 40% approved building materials, adobe, straw bale, non-metal roofing. Cost of land per acre, purchased 1990s. $500 visitors allowed per year, under 20, picture this. A cluster of small handmade buildings scattered across high desert scrub. No power lines overhead, just solar panels positioned far from living spaces connected by buried cables. No metal in the walls, because metal can act as an antenna. Cars are permitted, but only diesel engines. Fewer electrical components, and they must be parked at the perimeter of the community. The houses don't have refrigerators. The motors emit EMF. No microwaves, obviously. No LED lights. They flicker at frequencies that bother some residents. Just oil lamps, propane stoves, and absolute silence. The kind of silence you don't realize exists until you hear it. I talked to a former resident, someone who lived there for 3 years before deciding to attempt reintegrating into society. She asked me not to use her name because she's still in contact with people there and doesn't want to violate their trust. The thing people don't understand, she told me, is that it doesn't matter if you believe EMF sensitivity is real or not. What matters is that these people are suffering. I was suffering. Whether the suffering is caused by the signals themselves or by some other mechanism we don't understand yet, the suffering is real. And in that community, for the first time in years, I could sleep. I could think. I felt like myself again. She moved back to the grid 2 years ago. The symptoms returned almost immediately. She manages them now with medication and careful avoidance of the worst trigger points. No smart meters in her house, no Wi-Fi router, hardwired Ethernet only. Some days I want to go back to the land, she said. Other days I think I'd rather die than live like that again. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The scientific consensus says electromagnetic hypersensitivity has no proven physical mechanism, but scientific consensus has been wrong before about lead paint, about tobacco, about a dozen things we now accept as obvious. We are the first generation of humans to be bathed in artificial electromagnetic radiation 24/7 from birth. We've run exactly one experiment and we're all the subjects, and we won't know the results for another 50 years. The people in that Arizona desert might be canaries in a coal mine. Or they might be suffering from something entirely unrelated that happens to correlate with modern life. Either way, they've built their own world, and they're not coming back. Speaking of not coming back, our next town didn't reject the internet on purpose. They rejected it by accident, and then decided they liked it better that way. Norton, Virginia, where compasses go to die. Nestled in the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, there's a small hollow outside Norton that doesn't appear in most GPS systems. If you punch the address into Google Maps, you'll get directions that dead end at a gravel road with a sign that says private property and nothing else. This is Carfax Hollow, and it has a problem that money can't fix. A massive underground deposit of magnetite ore that turns the entire area into a natural Faraday cage. Let me explain. Magnetite is one of the most magnetic minerals on Earth. In large enough quantities, it creates localized magnetic field disturbances that can interfere with electronic equipment. Compass needles spin uselessly. GPS signals scatter, radio waves warp. Cell phones don't just lose signal, they behave erratically. Sometimes registering phantom bars, sometimes draining battery at 10 times the normal rate, sometimes heating up for no apparent reason. In the 1940s, a mining company explored the hollow for potential extraction. They determined that while the magnetite deposits were substantial, extracting them would require blasting so close to the residential area that the project was economically and politically unfeasible. So they left, and the hollow went back to being a weird little pocket of Appalachia where compasses didn't work. By the numbers, approximate population 75 across roughly 20 households, cell signal reliability under 15%, functional GPS accuracy to 400 meters, normally 5 meters, emergency response time due to difficulty navigating 45-60 minutes, county average 12 minutes. Now here's where it gets interesting. The residents of Carfax Hollow have had multiple opportunities to move. The county offered relocation assistance in 1998 after a resident died from a medical emergency because the ambulance got lost twice trying to find the hollow. The offer was rejected. In 2016, a telecom company proposed installing a specialized repeater system that could theoretically punch through the magnetic interference. It would have cost the company over $2 million in equipment and installation, funded entirely by a federal rural connectivity grant. Residents would pay nothing. The Hollow voted it down 17-3. The residents of Carfax Hollow aren't ideological. They didn't set out to make a statement about technology or privacy or the modern condition. They just live in a place where technology doesn't work. And over the decades, they've come to see that as a feature rather than a bug. In a way, they stumbled into a lifestyle that thousands of people pay $189 a night for in Hulett, Wyoming. They're just not interested in monetizing it. Every few months, someone calls asking if they can rent a cabin here for a digital detox, one resident told me. We always say no, this isn't a resort, this is just home. So there you have it, 10 places in America where the internet doesn't exist. 10 different reasons why, 10 different visions of what it means to live outside the endless scroll. Some of these stories are inspiring. Communities that found something valuable in disconnection, something they'd rather preserve than trade for convenience. Some of these stories are troubling. People making choices choices for others, trapping communities in the past to prevent uncertain futures. And some of these stories are just unsettling, reminders that the connected world we live in is actually quite new, quite fragile, and quite optional, even if we've forgotten that we ever had a choice. If I'm being honest, making this video changed how I think about my own relationship to the internet. I'm not about to move to Green Bank or buy a ghost town, but I've started noticing the reflexive way my hand reaches for my phone, the anxiety I feel when a notification goes unchecked, the hours that vanish into the scroll. Maybe the answer isn't to reject technology entirely, maybe it's just to remember that we can. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think. Would you live in any of these places? Did any of these stories change your perspective? Let me know in the comments. And if you found this video interesting, consider subscribing. We've got more deep dives into the weird corners of America coming soon. Until next time, stay curious, and maybe, just once in a while, put the phone down.